Why is nobody paying attention to the real signals? Quantitative tightening is ending, and historically, whenever QT ends, liquidity floods back into the system. Now, this is where risk assets like Bitcoin tend to explode to new all-time highs. Now, the last time this happened was around 2020, and that was right after the COVID crash, and this is where Bitcoin was sitting at a major level of support, but fear was everywhere, and most people were expecting the market to go lower, but instead, Bitcoin did the exact opposite. Now, fast forward to 2025/6, we are seeing a very similar setup forming once again. Now, in today's video, I'm going to break down why this QT signal is extremely bullish for Bitcoin, the 69K level that may aid in the next rally, and the two trade setups I'm currently watching on Ethereum and Link. If you want daily trade updates and market analysis, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. My trades and setups themselves are shared live inside my free Telegram group, and the link is in the description. Now, with that being said, let's dive into the macro climate. Now, first off, Michael Saylor's company Strategy has just raised $230 million in a single week specifically to buy more Bitcoin. Now, it's important because institutional players accumulating Bitcoin at this scale usually signal long-term confidence in the asset. When companies are raising hundreds of millions just to increase their Bitcoin holdings, it shows that large players like MicroStrategy are still positioning for the next major move. Now, at the same time, Citibank, a $2.5 trillion banking giant, recently stated that Bitcoin could still reach around $189,000 this year. Now, that's a massive target coming from one of the biggest financial institutions in the world. And when traditional banks start making bullish projections, it usually means that institutional interest in Bitcoin is continuing to grow. Now, it doesn't stop there either, because Telegram founder Pavel Durov has also made a bold statement saying that Bitcoin could eventually reach $1 million. And we see these targets popping up all over the place. But look, his reasoning is simple. Governments can keep printing money endlessly, but Bitcoin's 21 million supply is permanently limited. So nobody can print more Bitcoin, essentially. Now, when you combine institutional accumulation, macro liquidity shifts, and Bitcoin's fixed supply, it creates the exact environment where large expansions can happen when nobody expects it. So from a macro perspective, the long-term outlook for Bitcoin still remains extremely bullish. Now, with the macro wrapped up, let's dive into Bitcoin and analyze the charts, and we're going to begin on the monthly time frame. Now, when we actually analyze this Bitcoin max pain setup, that's what we've called it, and you actually break down periods of QT in cycles, we're going to begin with 2019. Now, this is where in August, QT ended for Bitcoin. Now, what's worthwhile noting, and this is similar for 2025 and 6, by the way, we'll break this down in a second, but before QT ended, Bitcoin did place a local top. Now, after QT, this is where Bitcoin then also had a multi-month correction for about 7 to 8 months before looking for major expansion. So QT ending itself doesn't necessarily mean we're going to explode straight away. Well, at least that wasn't the case in 2019. We put in a local top, QT ended, Bitcoin corrected for 6, 7, 8 months, and then the expansion unfolded, right? We did have the COVID crash. We had the Black Swan event, and this is what would have looked incredibly fearful. But albeit considered the major liquidation event that unfolded then, Bitcoin still held above a major level of support, and it in fact pushed from $5K to $70,000. So QT ends. Bitcoin placed the top 2 months before it did. It then corrected into QT whilst capital and liquidity was actually flowing into the market, which created a major odd but bullish divergence. It would have looked fearful. People would have been losing their minds. COVID, it's all going to zero. And then bang, you know, in the space of 6 to 8 months, Bitcoin's exploding to new all-time highs, again, from 5K to 70K. Now, look, focus on the structure. We had a local top a month or two before QT started back then in 2019, followed by 7 to 8 months of correction, max fear, and then explosion. If you fast forward to 2025, same sort of principle. Bitcoin a month or two before QT ended, right? Bitcoin placed a new all-time high and a local top at 126K in October 2025. A month later, QT ends. Right? QT ends in November of 2025. And then again, Bitcoin is doing the same thing it did back in the previous cycle and going through a multi-month correction. So do you see the similarities? We have a peak, a month later or two later, QT ends, Bitcoin corrects as capital starts flowing in, fear gets priced in, Bitcoin expands. Same again in 2025/6. Place a local high, a month or two before QT ends, come in for 5 to 6 months of correction. If Bitcoin can hold above sort of 50 to 60K, this could be gearing up for the next major leg of expansion. So this is how, quantitative tightening doesn't necessarily mark the low straight away, but does aid in the fact that when liquidity and capital starts flowing back in, regardless of dips, regardless of crashes or black swans, it always finds a way to expand to new all-time highs. So this may be a massive blessing in disguise. Now, with that wrapped up, let's look at Bitcoin on the daily. And we had a 68K level of, we had a 68K level of previous resistance that was turned into support during the week. This was on Tuesday. Now, what we was looking at in yesterday's video was Bitcoin actually sweeping that liquidity, which it did. It actually placed a new local high for the first time in, I think, about 30 days. However, that buy-side liquidity sweep has now drawn into a correction. So what we're aiming to look for is a retest to back down on the previous resistance at 69K to hold it as support to validate the potential of continuation back to the highs that we've just fallen from. Now, if Bitcoin can't hold this as support and it loses this retest, there's a previous level of descending resistance that Bitcoin was struggling to break through. However, again, it did get that breakout. We've got the new local high. If we lose 68 to 67K, simply look for this previous resistance trend line to maybe mark another low before giving another attempt at tackling this local high. So we're just trying to find support right now. We've broken out, looking for key levels. If structure holds and we stay above these higher lows from Wednesday, the 25th of February, Bitcoin is still in bullish structure, searching for a reversal. Now, tying that over into the 2 hour, this is where the liquidity sweep that we just seen to 74K comes into play, right? We were looking at the liquidity sweep here on the daily. This is it in more of a zoomed in perspective. Now, when it comes to the previous sort of higher low formation that Bitcoin was building, it created these order blocks. The previous one was at 64K. Bitcoin came back into that order block. It did sweep the liquidity, but then recovered up back into the supply zone. So now we're seeing a similar formation. We've had the previous rally off of the lows from Tuesday, the 3rd of March, up to 74K. And right now we're potentially coming back down to look for an order block, right? And that sits at 66K, those prior lows. So we could be repeating the same structure. And if Bitcoin does come any lower, if it can't hold 68 to 69K as support, if it fails to do that, then again, simply look for the bullish order block below at 66K, which could mark further higher lows before, going for the break of that supply. And again, that supply does sit at that sort of 70 to 74K level now that we've had the liquidity sweep. So, that's Bitcoin wrapped up. The larger timeframes are printing Bitcoin max pain setup with QT ending historical signals during this correction. The daily is saying that we've got 68K to potentially hold as support, but losing it, we also have the 66K bullish OB waiting below for a potential reaction. Now, with that wrapped up, let's look at our trading environment, and we're going to go onto our ETH trade. Now, yesterday we was talking about a position on ETH and actually entering this trade at roughly, I think it was just under 1.9K. And ETH was, the reason we was looking for this entry and waiting for this setup to unfold was because ETH tapped out at its local supply at 2.1K. It had this major supply block from throughout February, and we was expecting the rejection. Now, this is where we did get that rejection. And again, coming into today, ETH has come back into our entry. So we're now actually executed in this position. We've got a stop loss down in the low 1900 area. And we're just now waiting to mark the local low. There's liquidity here waiting. If we respect it at roughly 1.94, this is where we could see the uptick. And again, it's very evident to note that ETH is building this sort of higher low formation. It's got higher lows that are forming over time. So if that structure can be respected, this is where we could get that push to our TP target, which sits at 2.2k. So for the last couple of days, we was waiting for the execution. It's now unfolded. We're in the position. Fingers crossed. Now heading over to Link. Now this one, oh man, it was so close. The day before yesterday, we was talking about how we actually came up so close to our TP target, which was at $9.69, but we initially didn't actually get there. It ran just shy up to $9.65. And we said, hey, look, we've got this order block below waiting. If it respects that, we could get the push. However, that didn't come into play, and it has rolled over. Now, to protect the capital, what I've done is move the stop loss up to break even. And we are sort of, I think we're actually, or we have just swept below. So we was going to say, look, if it came back up to $9.60, we would have got a nice win. But look, even if it does sweep, we've protected the capital, and that's what trading's about. That's how professional trades are managed. When you see the fear, if it doesn't look too great, you know, you manage it. We brought the stop loss up to break even. We don't lose any capital. If the trade continued to go well and push up, we could have made something, but you win some, you lose some. It's all part of the ball game, right? Now let's take that over to our trading challenge, where we are taking $10,000 to 100K. And we've got $1,100 in profit as we speak, 10 total trades with a 60% win rate. Our last successful trade was on Bitcoin, which was a $560 profit. And again, you can use this free profits precision dashboard. You get 30 days of free access. The link's in the description. It monitors everything in one platform, guys. It's really a cool platform to keep everything up to date and transparent, especially for us here on the channel. So you know that we're just being honest with our setups. Now, again, if you enjoyed today's content, the link for the free Telegram free Telegram channel is in the description. And that's where all of our setups are actually unfolding. So get involved. Bring yourself over and come and join in the fun. I'll see you in the next update.